The story begins with a man hunting a purplish-looking deer. He set a trap and successfully captured it, feeling elated because it had been a long time since he'd had proper meat. Starving and eager, he could hardly wait to feast on it. However, little did he know that a giant wild boar was sneaking up behind him, looking both hungry and furious. The boar seemed incredibly dangerous, so the man immediately ran away, knowing it was too risky to stay. As he fled, he noticed the boar was following him and had taken the deer he had captured. Helpless, he could only watch as the monstrous boar devoured what was supposed to be his meal for the day, leaving him frustrated and defeated. He had expected this, given the nature of the place, but it made him reflect on why he ended up in such a hellish environment. This leads us to a flashback of his life a few days earlier. In a small town, our main character went to a man to buy a piece of land he had his eyes on for a long time. But as typical of most protagonists, he arrived late 4 days too late. The man informed him that the land had already been sold, leaving him devastated. He had spent 3 years saving every coin to buy that land, only to have his dream slip away. Now, his 5 gold coins seemed worthless. The man even remarked that his coins were dirty. Desperate, the protagonist asked if there was any other land available, even though he knew it was unlikely with only 5 gold coins. The man confirmed that there were no other lands like the one he wanted, further frustrating our protagonist. Feeling desperate, he begged the man to sell him any kind of land, saying he didn't care if it had no house, he just wanted to own something. The man, seeing his desperation, smiled and told him there was indeed a piece of land worth exactly 5 coins. It was a large, unexplored forest surrounded by mountains, cliffs, and the sea far from the town. The man explained that no one had ever set foot on this land, so there was little information about it. With nothing left to lose, the protagonist, in his desperation, agreed to buy it without thinking twice. Growing up, he had no special talents, another typical trait of manga protagonists. At the age of 15, he was kicked out of his house for no apparent reason and decided to become an adventurer simply because it seemed cool. However, he quickly learned that reality was different. Most adventurers he met lacked combat skills and struggled just to survive. He admired the high-ranking adventurers who occasionally appeared, but he found himself working odd jobs and wasting his savings on temporary pleasures. He even considered quitting adventuring, but he had no talent as a merchant or artisan. One day, in a panic, he realized his situation would only get worse if he didn't do something. He remembered that, even though he wasn't a great adventurer, he was the son of a farmer. If only he had his own land. Determined, he saved his money for 3 years, hoping to buy a piece of land and fulfill his dream. Finally, he had his own land and was ready to start his new life. As he walked toward his newly acquired land, some soldiers from the Kingdom of Estonia stopped him, asking where he was going. They informed him that there was nothing ahead except their training facility. He told the soldiers that he had bought the land up ahead. The soldiers looked at him skeptically and informed him, "Those lands are practically unexplored territory, known as the demonic realm." One of the soldiers then asked to see his adventurer card. The adventurer's card records the name and rank of the adventurer, with the card's color and material changing as their rank increases. However, the protagonist's card had the lowest class and had never changed. The soldiers were confused and wondered if he was really serious about what he had said. They advised him to first learn some survival skills in a nearby forest before venturing into the Devil's Nest. But in his careless and determined manner, he ignored their advice and proceeded to his land. He finally arrived at his property, which was a dense, dark forest. The deeper parts of the forest, filled with mystic creatures, were his. The soldiers had mentioned that it was full of monsters, yet it was peaceful and quiet, at least at first. However, when he looked back, he saw a giant bear and a giant hornet locked in a deadly battle. Terrified, he realized that he wouldn't stand a chance if he were to get involved. The fight ended with the bear decapitating the hornet. Once he was sure it was over, he cautiously approached the hornet's dead body to collect some loot. He was still anxious, having just witnessed such massive creatures, but it turned out to be an unexpectedly lucky day. He gathered valuable materials like the arthropod's eyes, feathers, and even a magic stone. Each monster has a magic stone with unique properties, which they use to manipulate magic and abilities, unlike humans, who gather magic from nature. The protagonist believed that this magic stone likely had a poison effect similar to cobra venom. However, he noticed that the venomous stinger, which should have been in the hornet's belly, was missing. He quickly realized what had happened and looked for the bear, which was already dead. His hunch was correct, the bear had been poisoned by the hornet's sting. Without wasting time, he decided to cut the meat, skin, and fur from the bear and dry them out a bit, a skill he had picked up from working at a butcher's shop. The materials he gathered from the bear were a promising start to his new journey. After 3 more days of heading deeper into the forest, he finally arrived at another part of the expansive land that he owned. As he stood there, he took a long, deep breath, gazing out at the rolling hills, lush green fields, and the distant horizon that seemed to stretch endlessly. The sheer beauty of the landscape left him in awe. It was a view he could hardly believe belonged to him. He felt a surge of joy and excitement, knowing that this land, this vast and fertile ground, was now his to cultivate and nurture. With a heart full of anticipation, he realized that his dream of living the life of a farmer was finally coming true. He could already imagine the fields filled with crops, the barn bustling with activity, and the simple, fulfilling life that awaited him on his own land, which seemed to go on forever. He noted that the river ahead marked the boundary of his land. Beyond the river, the ecosystem was clearly different. He was thrilled with his purchase, feeling he had made the right decision. As he continued walking, ready to take the first step into his new life, he suddenly stopped, sensing something unusual. He had stepped into something slimy, and it seemed to be moving on its own. It was a slime monster, and it appeared to be quite angry. The protagonist wanted to confirm if it was really a slime, and indeed it was a sticky, slimy creature. He prepared to fight the slime monster with all his might, but soon started feeling lightheaded, suspecting that the slime had drained his magic. He knew that if he got attacked again, he would faint from magic exhaustion. He needed to strike and break the core at the center of the slime to defeat it, so he quickly planned out various scenarios in his head. He launched an attack but missed the core, and his weapon began dissolving in the slime's body. Thinking quickly, he used the pelt made from the bear's skin to cover the slime's eyesight. Gathering all his courage, he struck again and finally hit the core, breaking it and killing the slime monster. Even though the slime was dead, it still sprayed him with some residue. Fortunately, his face didn't get dissolved. However, he was saddened that the bear pelt he had just obtained was wasted, leaving him with only a magic stone that wasn't particularly valuable in the market. Despite this setback, he pressed on, realizing that this was not the time to feel down. He needed to set up camp before nightfall. If only he had some tree branches and leaves, he could make a makeshift tent, but this forest was full of plants he had never seen before. He started collecting leaves to use for his camp. But he quickly realized these leaves were unlike any he had seen before. Some were deadly, so he had to be careful. While exploring the area, he stumbled upon a beautiful garden in the middle of the forest. It looked like a flower field amidst the jungle, which puzzled him. Why would something this beautiful exist here, he wondered. As he ventured closer, he noticed bones scattered among the flowers. They seemed to be the bones of monsters, and the sight made him uneasy. Something felt off about this flower field. It was suspicious and dangerous. Deciding to deal with it later, he proceeded to set up his camp. Once he was done, he thought, somehow things are starting to take shape here. But his stomach growled, reminding him of his hunger. He began cooking the wild boar meat he had managed to salvage earlier. As he waited for the meat to cook, he contemplated the challenges of this place. The plants and animals here aren't easy to deal with. Tomorrow, I'll need to start figuring things out while sorting out my life, he thought. Just as the meat was ready, he heard a rustling noise from the plants behind him. When he turned to look, he couldn't believe his eyes. A majestic but deadly green tiger was staring right at him. Fear gripped him as he remembered from his adventurer training that if you encounter such a beast unarmed, you must prepare to forfeit your life. But that advice seemed foolish now that he was face to face with this creature. In a desperate move, he poisoned the boar meat and threw it at the tiger, hoping it would eat it. However, the tiger didn't even glance at the meat. It just stared back at him, its eyes filled with predatory intent. The tiger wanted fresh meat, his meat. As the tiger prepared to attack, he knew he had no choice but to run. He tried to lure the tiger into the dangerous plants he had noticed earlier, narrowly avoiding its deadly bites as he screamed in fear. Fortunately, the tiger stepped on a slippery patch of ground and was knocked to the ground. This gave him the chance to run further away, which had been his plan all along. The tiger roared in anger as he continued to run, eventually finding a tree to rest against. As he sat there, panting and terrified, he began to lose hope about his new life. If this is what the first day is like, what does the future hold for me in this forest? He thought. Just as he started to cry, he heard the noise again, growing louder as it approached. Immediately, he sprang into action, sure that it was the tiger. Realizing he couldn't win this fight, he decided to abandon the area and return to the village to start over. But then he remembered all the hardships he had faced as an adventurer. I can't just give up, he told himself, wiping away his tears. Running won't make anything better. With no other choice, he resolved to face the situation head-on. This vast wasteland is all that's left for me. My life is here now, he thought. Determined, he climbed up the nearest tree, seeking refuge from the dangers below. He called out to the tiger, which had been relentlessly tracking him, its eyes gleaming with predatory intent as it growled and circled beneath the tree, never taking its gaze off him. In a desperate attempt to distract the beast, he tossed some boar meat down at it again, hoping it would take the bait. But the tiger, with its keen instincts, merely sniffed the offering and continued to ignore it. It was clear that this wild creature had its sights set on something far more challenging him. As morning arrived, the tiger was still there, waiting for him to come down. He devised a strategy to defeat the tiger, but he wasn't sure if it would work. If he was wrong, he would die for sure. The tiger tried to jump and reach him, but he used his axe to intimidate it from climbing up the tree. But this was part of his plan. The tiger fell into the flower field that he had deemed dangerous. His plan succeeded. and the tiger became unconscious the moment it landed in the flowers. His intuition had been correct. The flowers had a strong sleep-inducing effect that put anyone who touched them into a deep, never-ending sleep. He climbed down the tree, covered his nose, and proceeded to collect loot from the tiger. He was overjoyed to have won the battle against the green tiger and obtained useful materials. As night fell, he cooked the tiger meat he had collected earlier, his hunger gnawing at him. However, he quickly realized that he didn't like the taste of green tiger meat, but he had no choice but to eat it without complaint. After finishing his meal, he lay down, thinking about the delicious food he wished he could eat. As he gazed at the sky, he reflected on how tough life was out here, but he knew he had to persevere. "This place is my own hell, but I'm sure I'll figure something out," he told himself. The next day, he found himself in a dream, wondering where he was. The place looked like a city in Japan, and he was baffled by the strange devices he saw: a television, a computer keyboard. Suddenly, he woke up, seeing the blue sky above him. It was all a dream, but he was left confused by the images in his mind. He stood up, preparing for another day in this strange place he now owned. The dream lingered in his thoughts, as it was one he had experienced many times since childhood. Where could that place be, he wondered. Early in the morning, he was caught off guard by a slime, which was oozing its way toward his bag with surprising speed. Without wasting a second, he quickly grabbed his axe, determined to kill it before it could reach his precious belongings. He immediately aimed for the slime's core, striking with all his might to take it down as swiftly as possible. As the creature disintegrated, he noticed that his axe was dull now, the blade not as sharp as it used to be. Even so, he was glad that his bag was safe, and a thought crossed his mind: maybe I'm getting stronger, my muscles hardening with each battle as I continue to survive in this harsh land. After quickly dealing with the slime, he got serious and prepared himself for another day of exploring this hellish place. He knew he needed to familiarize himself with the entire area because, after all, it was his land. As he ventured deeper, something caught his attention: a creature known as an amia, with the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a snake. It appeared to be dead. He knew these creatures were strong, but he noticed something peculiar: a poison stinger from a Vesa hornet was lodged in its mouth. He realized it must have come from the meat he threw at the green tiger the day before. Wasting no time, he harvested anything useful from the dead creature and continued deeper into the forest. As he explored, he came across some mushrooms that looked edible, but he was cautious. This place was too dangerous to approach any plant without thinking. To test if the mushrooms were safe, he caught a small mouse and threw it at the mushrooms. As soon as the mouse touched them, it lost consciousness, and the mushrooms released a cloud of paralyzing spores. The mouse was completely immobilized. Another natural trap, he thought, realizing that nothing in this forest could be trusted. Then, an idea struck him. Since he lacked proper combat training, he decided to use his wits to survive. He began digging a hole to create his own trap. Carefully, he placed the sleep-inducing flowers and paralyzing mushrooms into the hole, covering it with a layer of leaves to conceal it. Once his trap was set, he returned to his camp, feeling the weariness in his bones. He sighed, grumbling to himself about how hungry he was. It had been far too long since his last meal. He hoped to catch something big the next day. When morning came, he rushed to check his trap, hoping for an edible catch. To his surprise, a giant boar had fallen into the trap. It was still sleeping, and he pondered what to do next. He quickly killed the boar and began harvesting everything he could from it. As he opened the boar's body with his knife, he was shocked to find a blue snake inside its stomach. The ecosystem of this place is truly bizarre, he thought. By the time he finished processing the giant boar, it was already dark. He had obtained a lot of useful materials, especially the meat. He started roasting the boar meat, thrilled to finally have some proper food. The taste was delicious, and he savored every bite. However, as he looked at his tools, he noticed that his knife and axe were becoming dull and would soon need to be replaced. He eyed the bones from the giant boar, thinking he might be able to craft something from them. He began sculpting the bones, and soon he had made a weapon from the boar's bones. It felt heavy in his hands, but it was manageable. Next, he crafted an axe, using tree sap as an adhesive. Once the sap solidified, the axe would be as hard as stone. He poured the sap into a mold made from clay, and when the axe was finished, he was satisfied with his work. His new weapons were ready for his next adventure. Before he knew it, morning had arrived. He had been so absorbed in making the tools that he hadn't even felt tired. He decided to set another trap, and this time he completed the task much quicker than the day before. Maybe I'm getting stronger, he thought. Or maybe it's because of all the meat I've eaten. Whatever the reason, he was happy with the changes he noticed in himself. No matter what he did before, he had never been able to get stronger. The next day, he ventured deeper into the forest and discovered a cave. Curious, he lit a torch and cautiously entered, calling out to see if anyone was there. Inside, he found a small house that seemed abandoned, but there were traces that someone had once lived there. He continued exploring and found the remains of a person sitting in a chair, holding a book. The initials PJ were written on the back. He took the book and realized it was a diary filled with records of monsters, edible plants, and medicinal herbs, a vital resource for surviving in this part of the forest. However, he noticed some unusual drawings and sketches in the book, depicting what appeared to be a guardian of the ruins fighting something. So, there might be ruins in this demonic realm, he thought. But the book didn't include any specific details. It seemed that PJ had been researching this place but had been unable to fully unravel its mysteries. PJ's last note expressed regret for not solving the mystery of these lands. Feeling a sense of respect for the fallen adventurer, he took PJ's core and buried it properly outside. Afterward, he returned to the cave and discovered a warehouse filled with unfamiliar metals, weapons, and armor. PJ must have been a highly skilled adventurer, he thought, wondering how such a person had met their end. As curious as he was about PJ's death, some things would have to remain a mystery. He reminded himself to be grateful for having found the cave in the first place. The cave's interior was untouched and seemed like a relatively safe place to stay. Without wasting time, he rushed back to his camp to gather his belongings, deciding to move into the cave. It's cool making a home around a cave, he thought, imagining that it could eventually become a beautiful place. He decided to start by cleaning up the entire area. He set to work, repairing all the salvageable items he had found, carefully patching up what he could. For the items that were beyond repair, he used the available materials he had on hand to create replacements. After hours of hard work, he finally finished and stepped back to admire his efforts, thinking to himself that it was good enough for now. As he returned to the cave, he couldn't help but greet his new home with a sense of satisfaction and a weary but contented smile. Of course, there was no one to welcome him because he was alone, but that suited him just fine. He found peace in being free from any troublesome human relationships. Several days passed, and it seemed like the soldiers of Estonia were in a tight spot. They were facing a massive and vicious bear near the main road. They knew they had to kill it before it could reach the road. Suddenly, a man appeared in their sights, our protagonist. He told the soldiers he was there to help them defeat the giant bear. One of the soldiers thought he was just a civilian, but before they could react, the bear attacked. The protagonist dodged the attack effortlessly, jumping high into a tree and preparing for a counterattack. With one swift strike, he killed the bear without breaking a sweat, landing in an impressive pose. The soldiers were shocked by what they had just witnessed. They asked him, "Who exactly are you?" He replied by asking if they had any seeds for wheat or vegetables and offered to trade some monster meat or magic stones for them. The soldiers informed him that they had plenty in their training facility and that he could have some if he accompanied them. He also requested charcoal and paper, offering to trade for those as well. After visiting the soldiers' facility, he obtained all the items he needed. By now, he was quite used to life in this cursed land, but there were still many places he hadn't explored. He realized he needed to make a map of the area. As he worked on the map, he wondered when he had become so strong. Perhaps it was because of living in this cursed land, surrounded by tough enemies. He had no choice but to toughen up to survive. He reached a river and looked at the water, surprised when he saw his reflection. "I haven't taken a bath since I came here," he realized, too focused on hunting to notice. He took a quick bath to freshen up from everything he had been through. Returning to his land, he began planting the vegetable seeds he got from the soldiers. As he worked on his farm, he hit something hard, and the ground suddenly moved. He realized he had been standing on a giant turtle the entire time. The turtle stood up, towering over him. He tried to order it to move in a different direction so it wouldn't mess up his farm, but the turtle attacked, sending him flying into the mud. "I just took a bath," he complained, now covered in mud. Angry, he decided to fight the turtle. However, the turtle suddenly collapsed, falling into a wild swamp and splashing him with mud again. The turtle died in the swamp, and he smiled, knowing exactly what to do next. He made turtle stew out of it, finding the meat delicious, but the soup made from it was even more irresistible. The next morning, he decided to go to the sea. He needed more salt to preserve all the meat he got from the turtle. As he continued drawing his map, he searched for the sea, following the river from the top of a hill. Finally, he arrived at the sea and couldn't believe that even in this cursed land, there was a proper sea. He immediately began extracting salt from the seawater, but then noticed something on the shore. There was someone lying beside the seashore, and he wondered if it was a human or something else. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the figure had horns and appeared to be a girl, likely not human. "This is my land, so technically she's trespassing," he thought, deciding to pretend he hadn't seen anything. He continued making salt but found himself unable to ignore someone in need. Reluctantly, he decided to look for medicine, even though it meant getting chased by a T-Rex-like monster in the process. He quickly made herbal medicine to treat her wounds, applying it carefully. He placed a piece of wood under her head so she could rest properly. As the sun began to set, he realized he needed to find food. He caught some crabs and grilled them, enjoying the meal immensely. Suddenly, the girl woke up and began sneaking up on him. He thought she was going to attack him, but it turned out she had been awakened by the smell of the food. Realizing he had no choice, he offered her some to eat. As they shared the meal, he tried to communicate with her, telling her to leave this demonic land because it was dangerous. However, it quickly became clear that she didn't understand his words. She didn't speak the human language. The girl called him Makio, and for the first time, our main character had a name. He tried to correct her, explaining that wasn't his name, but she kept calling him Makio. It seemed too troublesome to correct her, so he reluctantly accepted the name. From now on, we won't refer to him as MC anymore. He'll be known as Makio, the name given by this mysterious girl. Makio asked her what her name was, and she replied, "Sure then." Sure asked Makio if she could have more crab. Makio explained that there was none left and asked Sure how she had ended up in this place. Unable to explain in words, she drew in the sand to help him understand. Though her drawings were messy, Makio managed to piece together her story. She had escaped from a conflict among the demons, which led her to this land. Curious, Sure asked Makio what he was doing. He explained that he was making salt from seawater. Suddenly, Sure raised her hand and created a massive fireball, startling Makio. He was amazed and a bit scared by the display of magic. It turned out she was just showing him that she could use fire magic, possibly to help with the salt making. Makio decided to let her assist while he took a nap, thinking that maybe Sure could teach him magic while she stayed with him. The next morning, Makio woke up to find Sure still asleep beside him. He checked the salt and was surprised to see that there was a large quantity of it. Makio realized that having someone like Sure around could make tasks much easier. He gently woke her up and, in a calm but firm voice, asked her to come with him to his house. Makio initially planned to have Sure build a boat and send her back to where she came from, but for now he decided to let her stay at his place. As they walked, Sure followed Makio with boundless energy, darting ahead and circling back with a playful grin. But suddenly, it was as if a switch had been flipped. Sure's energy disappeared, and she seemed utterly exhausted. Her lively steps slowed to a shuffle. Her shoulders slumped, and it was clear that she was drained, as though every ounce of strength had left her. She was then attacked by a slime, which drained her mana, reminding Makio of his old self when he was still very weak. When they finally arrived at his cave, Sure was overjoyed to see Makio's home. Her face even turned red with excitement as she explored inside. Makio greeted his house, and as he did, Sure observed him intently. Suddenly she shouted, "I'm home. I'm home." Makio quickly corrected her, saying, "This isn't your house, it's mine," but Sure immediately lay down on Makio's bed, falling asleep almost instantly from exhaustion. Makio had brought her there thinking she might be helpful, but now he worried that she might just be a burden. He also knew that if he were caught harboring a demon, he would definitely be arrested, as it was against the law. Makio decided that once Sure woke up, he would send her back to where she came from. He preferred to live alone on his land. However, as he looked at Sure sleeping, he noticed she was crying in her sleep, possibly having a bad dream. Makio realized that Sure's situation reminded him of his own past when he had no place to return to. She was just like him. He decided to let her stay a little longer. The next day, Sure expressed her desire to accompany Makio on his adventures, but she was already exhausted. Makio told her that without enough stamina, she wouldn't survive in this hellish place. Seeing no other choice, he decided to train Sure so she wouldn't be a burden during his explorations. The first task he gave her was to catch as many forest rats as she could. Sure tried her best, but it was clear that the task was hopeless for her. Their next training session involved combat, and Makio wasn't sure what to expect. Sure, who seemed to be somewhat of a sorcerer, attempted to cast spells, but her performance was disappointing. She missed her target, a monkey, and Makio told her to aim properly before firing. He also advised her not to close her eyes when trying to attack an enemy. Unfortunately, the monkey noticed what they were planning and began to move, making the situation even more challenging. Makio warned Sure that if she wasn't careful, she'd die in this dangerous land. He commanded her to shoot at the monkey, but instead she accidentally hit him with her spell. The monkey looked at them in confusion, while Makio scolded Sure for her terrible aim. Determined not to disappoint him again, Sure continued her training to improve her accuracy. Finally, Sure managed to hit the monkey right in the chest. Proud of her achievement, she began bragging about it, which mildly irritated Makio. As night fell, they made their way back to their camp, with Makio carrying the exhausted Sure. He wasn't too pleased that they had only managed to catch one emerald monkey that day and felt a bit worried about their future prospects. While sitting around the campfire, Makio asked Sure to teach him some magic. Sure was thrilled by his request and eagerly agreed. She took his hands, trying to interlock them with hers. Suddenly, a glowing light began to emanate from both their hands, and Makio was amazed. It felt like some kind of energy, perhaps magic power, was flowing between them. Despite feeling a bit awkward, he couldn't help but smile. However, Sure suddenly let go of his hands and started murmuring words Makio couldn't understand. When he asked her what was wrong, she continued ranting in an unknown language. She then tried to explain by drawing on the ground, indicating that Makio's magic power was exceptionally high. But Makio was puzzled. He didn't even use magic. He wondered when he had acquired so much magic power and thought it might have something to do with training and growing stronger in this land. However, he didn't pay much attention to it since he usually relied on physical combat. Sure looked at him with disappointment, but Makio decided to try using magic anyway. He remembered that the most basic form of magic required visualization, so he concentrated and attempted to conjure something from his hand. After several attempts, he finally managed to create a small flame. While it wasn't much, it gave him a basic understanding of magic flow, but he knew that this tiny flame was not suitable for combat, and he would need to train harder to produce something more powerful. The next morning, Makio told Sure that they were going to defeat as many monsters as possible while training and heading back home. He decided they would take the cliff route, which was very high. He suggested that Sure use wind magic to fly if she could, but it became apparent that she couldn't control her wind magic well. Her face showed how impossible it was for her to climb the mountain. Makio reminded her that this was part of her training and that she needed to stop complaining if she wanted to survive in this land. Suddenly, a large moth-like creature appeared and began chasing Sure. Makio, assessing the situation, realized this was the perfect opportunity for Sure to train and commanded her to defeat the approaching creature alone. Despite her exhaustion, Sure focused and steeled herself for the fight. She decided to face the challenge head-on, determined to prove herself. The moth released a mysterious powder from its mouth, filling the air around them. Caught off guard by the surprise attack, Sure was momentarily stunned. Seeing the situation becoming dangerous, Makio immediately grabbed a tree trunk and intervened in the fight. He struck the moth right in the face, quickly checking on Sure afterward. Sure woke up and pointed at the moth, indicating that she wanted the magic stone from it. She asked Makio to place the stone on top of a branch to create a staff. Understanding her request, Makio crafted a staff for her using the big moth's magic stone, which had a paralysis effect on enemies. After receiving the staff, Sure seemed to have leveled up many times. This marked the beginning of Sure's triumphant journey. From that point on, they continued their training, with Sure growing significantly stronger. She even defeated a Visa hornet, a far more dangerous monster than the moth. She combined paralysis magic with fire magic to take it down, impressing Makio with how quickly she had improved after getting the staff. In the days that followed, they continued hunting monsters using the paralysis combo. They collected numerous magic stones from the monsters they defeated, and Makio's magic skills improved slightly as well. Although it wasn't enough for serious combat, they had become more accustomed to the land, and their movements were more fluid and confident. Makio was pleased with how much faster they were progressing. One day, while they were moving through the forest, Sure called Makio's attention to a group of imps at the top of a tree. Makio observed them and noted that the imps seemed to be having a good time. Sure immediately cast a spell at the imps, despite Makio's warning to stop. There were too many of them, and Makio knew they should retreat, but Sure continued to attack. Her spell paralyzed the imps, causing them to fall from the tree. However, their victory was short-lived. A massive sound erupted, and they realized the tree itself was a monster, now enraged by Sure's attack. It was a Trent, a dangerous type of monster. Makio was terrified. He knew that a Trent was far stronger than anything they had faced before. Despite the danger, Sure continued to attack it with her magic, only making the Trent angrier. Realizing this was a fight they couldn't win, Makio quickly grabbed Sure, carrying her as he began to run. The Trent was relentless, but Sure, even while being carried in a piggyback ride, kept casting spells to counterattack. Suddenly, the Trent stopped, and Makio thought the paralysis was finally taking effect. But he was wrong. The Trent's large roots lashed out, barely missing them as Makio dodged. Unfortunately, he was injured in the eye, but he kept running, knowing they needed to escape before the Trent caught up. Sure looked back and saw the Trent's roots or branches coming after them with devastating force. Out of nowhere, a memory of the television from his dreams several days ago flashed in Makio's mind. Suddenly, he and Sure began to float in the air. They were flying. Makio thought this must be Sure's magic, but when they safely landed on a mountaintop, Sure told him it wasn't her doing. That meant it was Makio's magic all along that had made them fly. He remembered the moment when he started floating, the image of that mysterious board that had appeared in his dreams many times since he was young, as if from another world. Sure then healed the wound on the side of his face. Makio asked Sure to teach him recovery magic next time, but she only mumbled words he couldn't understand. The next day, Makio began training his magic and tried to imbue fire magic into his knife. It seemed to work at first, but he had to throw the knife away because he couldn't stand the heat. The knife, made from a coconut tree, was naturally flammable and thus useless for this purpose. He tried various materials, like hell beetle horns and pincers, but nothing seemed to work well with his magic. He tried to remember the moment when he had flown and focused on visualizing it. He felt a strong power in his hands and thought he would succeed this time. But just as he was about to, Sure called out to him, saying the food was ready. Frustrated, Makio punched the ground, unintentionally creating a large hole, similar to Naruto's Rasengan. Both of them were shocked by what Makio had just done. Shur murmured something and made a lot of noise, which led Makio to think that maybe he had discovered a type of magic unknown to the demon race. They went inside the cave to eat, but Makio was disappointed with the meal Shur had prepared. He decided to cook the food himself and asked Shur to watch so she could learn. Makio baked bread for them, and Shur enjoyed it so much, saying it was delicious. He was glad that Shur liked his cooking, but the thought lingered in his mind that one day he would have to send Shur back to where she came from. Makio decided that they would chop wood that day to build a ship, so Shur could return home whenever she wanted. He began chopping a large tree but struggled because he didn't have a proper weapon. Then he remembered the armory filled with weapons and tools of all kinds. He quickly returned to the cave and came back with a beautiful sword, one of PJ's mysterious metal weapons. Combining the sword with his wind magic, Makio returned to chop trees. However, the weapon turned out to be too powerful. It fired a wind ball that damaged many trees in its path. Makio realized the sword was too dangerous for cutting trees and decided he needed to be more careful when using PJ's weapons. Still, they had plenty of wood now to start building Shur's ship. Makio noticed that the wood wasn't drying fast enough, so he decided to wait before continuing the project. Meanwhile, he considered practicing infusing magic into various parts of his body. Shur asked for permission to hunt demons, and after a moment of consideration, Makio allowed her to go on her little adventure, warning her to be careful. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the land, Shur returned with a proud smile and some freshly baked bread in hand. They sat together, enjoying the simple meal as they shared stories and laughed about Shur's hunting adventure. The bread tasted even better with the warmth of their conversation, with the air filled with the sound of their voices and the crackling fire. The next morning as Makio woke up, he noticed something strange. It had suddenly become noisy, and there was an odd chill in the air. The once peaceful morning now felt different, as if something had changed overnight. He couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was happening outside. When Makio looked down, he realized that they were already in the air, being carried by dragons known as wyverns. It became clear that these creatures were very hungry. Shur had also been taken by another wyvern, but she was still sound asleep and unaware of the danger. Makio knew he needed to find a way to escape from these flying monsters, but they were too high up for him to make a move just yet. Shur eventually woke up and immediately attacked the wyvern, carrying her with fire magic. Seeing this, Makio had no choice but to attack the wyvern that was carrying him. He used his knife to slice through its claw, causing him to fall. However, he had already learned how to infuse his body with magic, so he instantly confronted the wyvern head-on. Makio infused his fist with earth magic and broke the wyvern's tooth, then followed up with a powerful punch to its head, continuing to pummel it until it was dead. As they plummeted toward the ground, Makio infused his feet with wind magic, cushioning his landing and crushing the wyvern's face into the ground to ensure it was completely dead. He then looked up to check on Shur, impressed by her ability to encase herself in water magic. However, she started to drown mid-air due to her carelessness, so Makio quickly intervened to help her. As the sun set, they found themselves in a rocky area with nothing but stones and sand, and they had lost all their belongings. To make matters worse, a sandstorm was brewing, forcing them to spend the night there. The next morning, Makio noticed that Shur was sick, with a high fever, likely due to her exposure to the water magic. He needed to find some medicine, but there were no herbs in the barren landscape. Remembering the book he had gotten from PJ, Makio searched for useful information. According to the book, a magic stone from an imp could be used as a remedy for colds. He recalled that the imps were with the Trent that had chased them in the marshlands far to the north. Despite the distance, he had no other choice. Makio made a canopy from the wyvern's membrane to provide Shur with some shade, then infused magic into his legs and started running at incredible speed, like a flash of lightning. He reached the marshlands in a very short amount of time and quickly killed an imp to retrieve its magic stone. However, his old foe, the Trent, recognized him and became enraged, attacking him for killing its pet imp. Makio dodged the Trent's attacks and told it he didn't have time for this. Infusing earth magic into his feet, he stomped on the Trent's roots, breaking them. He then infused his fists with fire magic and delivered a powerful punch, severely hurting the Trent. After a few more fiery punches, Makio finally defeated the tree monster. Exhausted but determined, Makio rushed back to Shur in the desert. Upon returning, he immediately used the magic stone from the imp to treat Shur's sickness. As he did, he noticed a black smoke-like substance leaving the magic stone. Perhaps this was the cause of Shur's cold. After the treatment, Shur was completely healed and smiled at Makio, grateful for what he had done. Makio was relieved that the treatment had worked, but now Shur couldn't stop clinging to him, much to his mild annoyance as her horns kept poking him. Meanwhile, at the border of the demon land, a group of adventurers had entered Makio's territory. It seemed that when he returned home, Makio would have some unexpected visitors to welcome. Makio and Shur finally returned home, and Makio decided to start working in the fields. Using magic, he drew water into the fields, ensuring the plants would grow well. Suddenly, Sure called out to him, pointing in a specific direction. "Makio, we have visitors. And from the looks of it, they're strong adventurers." Makio decided not to confront them immediately and chose to observe them for the time being. The adventurers soon encountered a slime monster in the demon land. The man who seemed to be the captain of the group instructed his party to aim for the core, but they were struggling. They were caught off guard, unaware that the monsters in the demon land were on a different level. Even ordinary slimes were surprisingly strong. The adventurers then faced a large snake, throwing everything they had into the battle. However, Makio noticed their chaotic and rough tactics, revealing their lack of experience. They couldn't even aim properly for the monster's core. Sure, growing bored from watching, remarked that the adventurers seemed exhausted, having run out of magic. Despite this, the group still wanted to venture deeper into the forest. Seeing their determination but recognizing the danger, Makio decided to approach them. After all, he was the landlord of these lands. He called out to them, asking what they were doing there. The group introduced themselves as the adventurer party White Lightning, and stated that they had come to seek battles against strong monsters, planning to kill every monster in the area. The captain proudly showed Makio his adventurer card. Makio then informed them that this area was private property and that they should not enter without his permission. It would be troublesome if you got hurt or died here, he added. The captain, however, grew angry, declaring that they didn't need permission because they were a renowned party, even in the city. Makio calmly replied, "I've been observing you, and from what I've seen, you're likely to die here. Struggling with slimes is a clear sign that going deeper into the woods would be far too dangerous." Suddenly, a strange-looking dragon landed nearby, already chewing on something. The adventurers immediately panicked and fled back toward the town, running like frightened chickens. Makio watched them flee but noticed they had forgotten one of their companions, a cleric, who was still unconscious. Makio wondered what to do with her. Afterward, Makio and Sure returned to the cave and collected a large number of magic stones. They planned to go to the training facility to trade the goods and also leave the female cleric there. Makio told Sure to hide her horns properly so that people wouldn't notice them. After packing everything up, they were ready to go. Infusing his legs with magic, Makio set off toward the training facility. Upon reaching their destination, he immediately approached the man in charge, explaining his purpose. He introduced Sure as his companion, mentioning that despite her small size, she was reliable, and with her help, they had doubled the usual amount of magic stones collected. He also mentioned the female cleric who had collapsed in the demon land and said he wanted to leave her at the facility. The man in charge remarked that things were getting quite interesting in the demon land. He was amazed by what Makio had done with the green tiger's fang, transforming it into a sword. Makio also requested some metal swords, sewing tools, woodworking tools, and women's clothes for Sure. Lastly, he inquired about a spellbook on space-time magic. The man advised him that the spellbook he was looking for was extremely expensive and that there were many counterfeit books on the market that were also costly. To avoid getting scammed, he suggested that Makio go to the capital to search for the book himself. Makio agreed, understanding the man's advice, and decided he would look for it in the capital. The next day, Makio and Sure decided to search for the ruins mentioned in PJ's notebook, which were said to be located in the demon land. They were excited about the mission, but there was one problem: the exact location of the ruins wasn't written in the notebook. As Makio sat down to review the map of the demon land, he realized that he still hadn't fully grasped the vast and mysterious territory. The southern part of the map, in particular, remained unexplored and shrouded in mystery. It was becoming increasingly clear to him that this was a serious problem that needed to be addressed. Determined to make sense of the situation, Makio focused intently on the southern region, convinced that this was the area they needed to venture into. He believed that exploring this uncharted territory might lead them to something new and possibly crucial. After weighing their options, Makio and Sure decided that their next move would be to head south, bracing themselves for whatever challenges or discoveries awaited them in this unexplored region. As they journeyed south, they encountered monsters they hadn't faced before, but they dealt with them without much trouble. Eventually, they reached the desert part of the land, and Makio couldn't help but feel confused. Why is there a desert here? He wondered, thinking he might have missed something along the way. Suddenly, a massive monster appeared before them, its size so enormous that it even surprised them. Makio quickly checked PJ's notebook and identified the creature as a sandworm. Though its size was intimidating, the notebook categorized it as a weaker monster. Makio questioned the logic of this, wondering which part of it could possibly be weak as they ran from the creature. He tried using a magic sword to fight it, but the blade barely scratched its thick skin. Now, he realized they had no other choice but to run. They fled as fast as they could, with the sandworm chasing them until they reached the safety of the forest. Catching their breath from the exhausting run, Makio pondered, where could its weakness be? And who the hell is PJ? They decided to return home and research more about these monsters and how to defeat them using the information in the notebook. Makio also speculated that PJ might have had a weapon decisively different from his own. Makio had noticed drawings of a magic circle appearing in various places, and he found similar designs in the notebook. He decided to try channeling magic power through one of the circles, but to his shock, it suddenly exploded. Both he and Sure were stunned by the result. Upon closer inspection, Makio realized that the magic circle was cutting through space as if it were paper. He checked PJ's weapons and saw that all of them had magic circles incorporated into their design, but they were so well integrated into the decorations that they were easy to overlook. Now, more baffled than ever, Makio wondered who PJ really was. Maybe he was a very skilled craftsman, Makio thought. He also questioned how PJ could have died in this land, despite his apparent expertise. The next morning, Makio decided to return to the desert to fight the sandworm using PJ's sword. However, first, they needed to fetch some water. As they headed to the river to collect water, they were unaware that the cleric, Jennifer Vove, had returned and was standing behind them. Makio noticed her and quickly asked, "What are you doing here?" Jennifer immediately introduced herself, explaining that she had left her party and now wanted to live on Makio's land. Makio, however, declined her request without hesitation and continued fetching water. But Jennifer was persistent. She insisted that she could be useful to him, explaining that she could heal injuries and illnesses, manage consumables for the party, and handle various other tasks. She once again asked Makio to take her in, but Makio declined just as quickly as before. Trying to convince him further, Jennifer mentioned that she was from the north and could handle the cold. Makio, confused, asked if she had been fired from her party, suspecting that this was why she had returned. Jennifer retorted, "That's none of your business," but Makio remained firm, telling her that he still wouldn't allow her to stay on his land. Finally, Jennifer admitted the truth. Her party had told her she was no longer needed. She began to beg Makio to let her live on the land. Makio asked why she didn't just return to where she came from or go home, but Jennifer revealed that she had no home to return to because she was an orphan. Despite this, Makio still refused, insisting that it was safer for her to go elsewhere rather than stay in the demon land. But Jennifer remained stubborn, insisting that this land was where she had been searching for her entire life. She believed that no one would betray her here and that it was an ideal place, a wonderful land with no one around. Makio, growing exasperated, shouted, "You really have guts saying those words in front of the land's owner." Jennifer, undeterred, asked Makio to guide her to a house. Makio told her that if she really wanted to live there, she would have to pay rent and promise not to make a fuss about anything she saw. Jennifer agreed, saying she would secure the money for rent. Makio then warned her to be careful of the monsters in the area. Not long after, Jennifer was attacked by a slime and ended up exhausted from mana depletion. Despite her earlier confidence, it was clear she had much to learn about surviving in the demon land. Makio decided to let Jennifer stay in his cave for a while, reasoning that it would be troublesome if she died and turned into a monster. However, as soon as they entered the cave, Jennifer suddenly screamed, "There's a demon inside your house." She was referring to Sure, who had her horns visible. Makio quickly reminded Jennifer of the rule he had implemented: no making a fuss about what she sees here. As they settled in, Makio ate some bread and decided to go water the fields. Jennifer followed him, continuing to ask if it was really safe to keep a demon like Sure around. Makio just told her to be kind to Sure, explaining that even though she was a demon, she was a good person and deserved to be treated with respect. Jennifer insisted that Sure wasn't safe there, and that if she were found out, she would be taken to the guards. "That was 100 years ago," Makio replied, before asking Jennifer if persecuting innocent people was still the teaching of the church. Makio then told Jennifer to leave Sure alone, mentioning that Sure was teaching him magic as payment for her rent. He added that he had actually gotten quite good at using magic thanks to her. He also warned Jennifer that if she couldn't pay rent, she would have to leave. Jennifer quickly responded that she had 10 gold coins, which she thought would be enough for a month's rent. Makio looked at her and agreed that 10 coins would be fine, but when Jennifer handed him a check, he frowned. "This isn't gold coins," Makio pointed out. Jennifer, being from the countryside, explained that she was used to paying with checks in the capital and suggested that Makio could go to a money changer to exchange it for gold. However, Makio reminded her that this wasn't the capital, and there were no money changers around. Jennifer, growing frustrated, declared that instead of paying, she would work for him doing tasks like dishwashing, collecting firewood, or cooking food. Her expression suddenly changed as she vowed that she would do anything and someday become the best in this hellish place, seeking revenge on the party that had kicked her out. Makio didn't like what she said and told her that this place wasn't right for her, once again insisting that she leave. Jennifer asked why he was saying that, and Makio responded that he now understood why she had been expelled from her party, because she didn't know how to listen to others. He explained that she was the type of person who got angry when things didn't go her way, and if she stayed here, things would rarely go her way because the demon land was not an easy place. Furious, Jennifer stormed off, and Makio and Sure watched her leave. Makio thought it was for her own good, believing she was better off in the capital where revenge had no place. The next day, Makio and Sure continued their exploration of the desert, bringing PJ's sword with them. Makio stretched before infusing magic into his legs to run quickly, but Sure stopped him. pointing in a direction. They saw Jennifer lying on the rocks, unconscious. They immediately rushed to her and Makio checked her over, noting that her legs were broken but she was still breathing. He decided to bring her back to their cave to recover from her injuries. Using recovery magic, Makio healed her wounds, thinking she would be okay for now. Makio then told Sure that he wanted to continue exploring the desert. They returned to the desert, waiting for the sand monster to appear. When the sandworm finally emerged, Makio was ready, wielding PJ's sword. He fought the creature and easily sliced it into fine cuts, laughing in disbelief at how easily he had killed it using PJ's weapon. Now they understood why PJ had categorized the sandworm as a weak monster. It was the sword that was truly amazing. Still puzzled by the notebook's warning about poisonous plants, Makio noted that there didn't seem to be any plants in the area at all. They continued their exploration, venturing deeper into the desert. Suddenly, they spotted something in the sky. Sure thought it might be a kite or a bird, but as Makio got a closer look, they realized it was an island floating in the sky, held up by massive chains. Makio smiled, thinking that this might be the ruins mentioned in PJ's notebook. Makio decided they should climb up to the island right away. He was amazed by the size of the chains and couldn't even guess what they were made of. As they started to climb, Makio felt something was off. He discovered that the chains repelled their magic no matter how much he coated his body with magic. The chains seemed to absorb it. Sure tried as well, but she was instantly repelled. Makio realized that whoever had created something like this must have been incredibly powerful. For now, they focused on climbing. After a challenging ascent, they finally reached the floating island. Exhausted, they took a moment to rest, their energy drained not only from the climb but also from the chains absorbing their magic. As they explored, they were surprised to find a town on the island complete with houses, furniture, and signs of cultural life. However, the place seemed deserted, with no human bones or signs of conflict. It was as if the inhabitants had simply vanished without a trace. In the center of the town, Makio found a grave with a note that read, "Peter Jefferson rests here." Makio was shocked, realizing that PJ stood for Peter Jefferson. But this discovery raised more questions. If PJ is resting here, then whose skeleton was that in the cave? As the sun began to set, Makio decided they should camp on the island for the night. However, as night fell, Makio found it difficult to sleep due to the tremendous cold. He asked Sure if he could huddle with her for warmth, but Sure misheard him and thought he said cuddle, so she immediately hugged him. Embarrassed, Makio told her to stop, but Sure refused to let go. The next morning, Makio and Sure decided to leave the floating island and return to their cave, as there were no more discoveries to unfold. Once back, Makio decided to heat some water for a bath, as he was covered in sand from their journey. After bathing, Makio and Sure ate some bread. Remembering Jennifer, Makio wondered if she had already left, but to his surprise, he found her still lying on the bed. Her condition seemed to have worsened, and upon closer inspection, he noticed that her wounds were quite serious. As concerned, he immediately called for Sure. Sure tried to treat Jennifer with healing magic. Afterward, Makio asked her why she was still there. Jennifer explained that she couldn't leave because there were monsters and plants that attacked her as soon as she tried to leave. Makio, puzzled, asked why she hadn't healed herself, given that she was a cleric. Jennifer admitted that she had used too much magic and had run out of power. Makio, too tired to argue with her, decided to go to bed, telling Jennifer to keep the fire going. He also told her that she should do some work as she was eating their food. The next morning, Makio was surprised to see Jennifer still sitting in front of the fire. He couldn't believe that she had kept the fire going all night without sleeping. Jennifer explained that she hadn't been able to do anything since coming to this land, and she couldn't even manage to go back to the town. Feeling a bit bad for her, Makio decided to give her a paralysis staff so she could paralyze monsters and make it to the stream at the entrance. But instead of accepting the staff, Jennifer suddenly knelt in front of Makio and begged him to let her stay in the cave, promising to pay for her lodging. Makio was shocked by her stubbornness. Jennifer confessed that she was fully aware of her shortcomings and weaknesses, and if she left without doing anything, nothing in her life would change. Makio then asked if she was still thinking about getting revenge on her former comrades who had banished her. Jennifer finally opened up about her life, revealing that she had been abandoned by her parents and left at a church, where she became a cleric. Although the sisters at the church had told her to live freely, she was eventually kicked out from there as well. She then became an adventurer and joined a party, but was also kicked out. Taking revenge had just been an excuse because in reality no one needed her because of her attitude and unwillingness to acknowledge her own weaknesses. Makio asked if she had a purpose in the demon land, and Jennifer replied that if she had a purpose, it was because of him and Sure. She admired their ability to live in this harsh and mystic realm without needing anyone, and she found that amazing. Jennifer then begged Makio to teach her about adventuring, but Makio told her that if she wanted to learn, she had to do it on her own. Jennifer smiled, full of energy, and said she would do it on her own. She then grabbed Sure and asked her to teach her how to make bread. Makio told Jennifer that she could stay for a while and do as she liked. She then asked if she could use the empty space as her bed and handed Makio a gold coin as advance payment. Makio accepted the coin but noted that he had never seen an old gold coin like it before. Jennifer explained that it was the only drop she had received from a female zombie, the only monster she had defeated in the demon land. Later that day, Makio and Shur resumed making a paralysis staff, with Jennifer observing them. Curious, she asked what they were making. Makio explained that they were making staffs to trade at the training facility, but these were just poorly made or freebie items. Jennifer, as a debuffer, immediately disagreed, saying that the staff was far from cheap. Flattered by her words, Makio and Shur smiled. After finishing the staff, Makio and Shur headed to the training facility, leaving Jennifer in the cave. On their way, Shur asked Makio why Jennifer was still staying with them. Unsure of what to say, Makio told Shur that Jennifer wanted to have adventures and had decided to stay on her own. It seemed Shur liked her. When they arrived at the training facility, the man in charge told Makio that the staff he had brought before had sold for a high price, and many customers were requesting more. The man also had a magic book for Makio, but it wasn't about time and space as Makio had requested. Instead, it was a beginner's textbook. Makio checked the book and saw that it only contained basic magic effects and magic circles, but he thought it could still be useful. He took the book along with some tools for shipbuilding and some women's clothing. Back in his cave, Makio immediately began studying the book, trying to understand the magic circles drawn on PJ's weapons. He could roughly categorize them into fire, water, earth, and wind systems, but he still couldn't fully grasp their meanings. He decided to copy the writings and drawings for future reference. Suddenly, Jennifer entered his room and asked why he was reading books and if he was going to kill monsters today. Makio replied that she could go and defeat monsters if she wanted to, but he was too busy studying. Jennifer stared at him for a moment before deciding to leave him to his work. Later, she thanked Makio for getting her some nice clothes. Makio brushed it off, saying it was nothing. Meanwhile, outside the entrance to the demon land, another adventurer was planning to enter Makio's private property. The next day, Shur approached Makio in an energetic and joyful manner, her body covered in blood. Concerned, Makio asked why she was covered in blood, and Shur cheerfully replied that it wasn't her blood but from the haze turtle she had killed. She then showed Makio something that looked like a stone with lightning patterns etched into it. Makio examined the stone, noting that it didn't seem to be a normal stone. He tried infusing it with magic, but nothing happened. Maybe it's man-made, he mused. When he asked Shur where she found it, she answered that she found it in the swamp. Shur mentioned that she had also been trying to teach Jennifer how to swim, but it wasn't going well. Jennifer struggled with the basics, leaving Shur frustrated and concerned. Meanwhile, Makio, observing the situation, began to suspect that there might be ruins buried beneath the swamp that could be related to their current troubles. Determined to investigate, he decided to check it out himself. Makio prepared to dive deep into the murky waters of the swamp, knowing that visibility would be poor. Before diving, he cast a spell to enchant his hand with magic, creating a sort of underwater flashlight. With the magical light illuminating his path, Makio took a deep breath and dove into the dark, mysterious depths of the swamp, ready to uncover any secrets that might be hidden below the surface. As he swam deeper, a giant fish monster suddenly attacked, attempting to swallow him whole. Makio quickly punched the monster on its side, leaving a hole in its body and forcing it to retreat. He then proceeded to dive even deeper, using magic to create a current that would push the giant fish away and prevent it from disturbing him. However, the current also stirred up the mud, making it difficult for Makio to see clearly. Despite this, he knew there were ruins buried under the mud. After a while, he returned to the surface, deciding to wait for the water to clear before diving again. As Makio stepped back onto land, he noticed a figure entering his territory. It was a girl wearing a mask and holding a huge hammer. Makio immediately confronted her, asking what her business was on his land. The girl carelessly approached him, unaware that she was stepping on water. Suddenly, a slime monster attacked her from behind. Shur suggested they help her, but Makio decided to wait until the girl was in real danger. When the girl was fully submerged and pleading for help, Makio finally intervened, grabbing her by the cloth and pulling her out of the water. He was surprised to discover that the person he had rescued was a woman, having assumed she was a man because of her hairstyle. He scolded her, telling her that if she wanted to venture into this land, she needed to be stronger because people who were easily beaten by slimes had no hope here. The girl apologized and explained that she had come because she had heard that the wands made in this land were of high quality. Makio told her that he only sold wands to the military training facility, but the girl begged him to sell her one. Makio agreed but said she would have to trade high-value items because he didn't need money. The girl then offered her backpack for him to inspect. Inside the backpack, Makio found a book that looked like a history book. Curious, he asked whose history it was about. The girl replied that it was about this place filled with the author's imagination, including tales of floating islands and tall monsters. Makio proposed to trade one wand for 10 history books. The girl was delighted but panicked when Makio told her that she would have to come back next time for the wands since he hadn't made any yet. She protested, saying it wasn't fair for her to leave with nothing. Makio then asked her if she could keep a secret. If she couldn't, the deal would be off. The girl instantly agreed, so Makio revealed Shur's horns, showing that she was from the demon tribe. The girl was shocked, but she promised not to say a word about what she had seen. Makio reminded her that if she broke her promise, the deal would be off. Makio then ordered Jennifer to check if there was anything they could trade outside and instructed Shur to choose magic stones and start making the wands. He asked the girl why she needed the wands, and she explained that in her region, bandits had revolted against the government and they needed powerful weapons to fight back. Jennifer then whispered to Makio that she wanted to speak privately. She suspected that the girl might be a thief because all the items in her backpack were of high quality and could only be found in a noble's house or carriage. Jennifer also mentioned that the girl seemed familiar. Overhearing their conversation, the girl insisted that she wasn't a thief. When Makio pressed her about the origin of the items, she revealed that she was actually a noble from East Kenya, sent by her uncle, the lord of their town, to purchase weapons. Jennifer realized why the girl looked familiar and explained that East Kenya was the nearest place to the demon land. Many people mistakenly believed the demon land was part of East Kenya's territory, but it wasn't. Now, knowing the girl's true identity, Makio hesitated to sell her weapons, especially given the political situation. He told her to flee immediately, but the girl insisted that the people in East Kenya had no choice but to fight or flee. Jennifer added that East Kenya, being close to the land of the elves, was known for its bravery and recklessness. In other words, the people there were savages. Makio suspected that the girl's uncle had sent her away to keep her safe, but the girl didn't buy it. She claimed to be the best female warrior in East Kenya. Despite the revelation that her items were not stolen, Makio reminded her to keep the secret about Shur. He then resumed his investigation of the swamp but still found nothing significant in the ruins. The next day, Makio decided to spend his time reading the history book instead of returning to the swamp. The book revealed that the land they were living on used to be a country where people suddenly disappeared in large numbers without warning. It also mentioned floating islands that were consumed by gigantic beasts and a religion where deer were considered messengers of God. The book described the territory as one plagued by natural disasters, and Makio realized that the cave they were living in might have once been a shelter. What concerned Makio the most was the truth about East Kenya. The book stated that East Kenya was a fertile land, but it was often plagued by rebellion and wars. Makio began to suspect that the adventurers who had entered his land might have caused internal conflicts and were trying to reclaim the land out of greed. Makio thought to himself that things were going to get messy and chaotic in the coming days. He felt a storm brewing on the horizon, one that could bring trouble to his land. The next day, Makio went to the training facility and informed the man in charge about the girl who had ventured into his land the previous day. He mentioned that she spoke of a rebellion in a nearby town. The man reassured him that the rebellion had probably already been suppressed and that there was no need to worry about it. After finishing their visit to the training facility, Makio and Shur immediately headed back home. Suddenly it started raining, but they continued on their way despite the downpour. Makio grumbled about the terrible timing of the rain. When they finally arrived at the cave, they found Jennifer gathering sandbags. She told Makio that they needed to place sandbags at the entrance of the cave to prevent flooding and also advised him to check the fields. Makio rushed to check their fields and was alarmed to see the water level rising rapidly. It wouldn't be long before the fields would flood. He quickly used his magic to elevate the fields, preventing them from being submerged. When he returned to the cave, Jennifer asked how the fields were doing, and Makio grimly replied that it wasn't looking good. They decided that they would have to rely on trading for vegetables and wheat for a while. The rain continued to pour heavily throughout the day, and by the next day it had intensified even further. Shur speculated that they might be in the middle of a hurricane. With no way to go outside, Makio decided to craft some homemade traps using PJ's magic circle. He planned to create an explosive trap that could blow off a large monster's leg. However, their work was interrupted by a loud explosion outside. Shur and Jennifer quickly called Makio to come outside, where they saw a gigantic figure in the middle of the storm. Makio, puzzled, asked if there had always been a mountain there, but they soon realized that the mountain was moving. It was a giant magical beast, just as mentioned in PJ's notebook. This massive creature was the cause of the thunderstorms and strong winds. According to the notebook, this beast appeared only once every 3 months and killed many monsters in its wake. Makio was still confused about where such a huge creature had been hiding all this time. The number of monsters that had died was staggering, with many being lifted by tornadoes and struck down by lightning. Parts of the cave had also collapsed, and Makio realized that if they stayed inside, they might get buried alive. Noticing that the monsters were fleeing north, he told Shur and Jennifer that they should also flee in that direction. The magical beast continued roaring and causing chaos in the land as they began their escape. They ran as fast as they could, trying to get away from the calamity. It seemed as though the lightning was following them, but they continued running north on the map until they reached the wasteland. Makio stopped and stared at the scene before him, thinking that it looked like the end of the world. However, the wasteland wasn't in good condition either, so they decided to return to the forest. Once in the forest, they searched for a place to hide and rest. While walking, Makio didn't notice a trap, and both he and Jennifer fell into it. They were hurt a little from the fall, and Makio realized that they had landed in what seemed to be an old well, or perhaps the ruins of a place where people once lived. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain. His left leg was broken. At least they were now sheltered from the wind and rain for the time being. Sure, worried, called down to him, and Makio reassured her that he was alive, though in pain. Sure climbed down with some firewood, and they started a fire to warm themselves because it was bitterly cold. Even from a distance, they could still hear the footsteps of the giant magical beast. Jennifer suddenly apologized to Makio for being a burden and admitted that she had thought she was going to die earlier. Makio told her that they were still not safe yet. Exhausted, Makio suddenly lost consciousness. The next morning, Sure poked Makio's head to wake him up, but when he didn't respond, she decided to shout to really wake him up. Groggily, Makio finally awoke, noticing that his foot had been healed. Jennifer explained that she had used her healing magic on it. Sure called them over to check out a passage she had discovered. They ventured inside, using a torch to light their way because it was too dark to see anything otherwise. As they made their way through the narrow, winding passage, their anticipation grew. When they finally reached the end, they were greeted by the sight of glowing mushrooms, their soft luminescence casting an enchanting light in the darkness. It was a magical display in the otherwise gloomy cave. However, Makio quickly cautioned them not to touch the mushrooms, warning that they might be infused with poison or have paralysis properties. The area turned out to be an underground lake, its surface shimmering under the eerie glow of the mushrooms. The lake was serene yet mysterious, adding a new layer of intrigue to their exploration. As they explored further, Sure found something interesting and showed it to Makio, a thunderstone. When Makio asked where she found it, she told him that it was being held by a skeleton. Makio examined the skeleton and found a beginner's adventurer guidebook with an old design. Inside, they saw a drawing of the thunderstone along with a note that said, "Don't lose the dungeon keys." Makio speculated that the round stone might be the key to a dungeon. He mentioned that he had never been inside a dungeon before, prompting Jennifer to explain that she had explored dungeons with her former party back in the capital. They then read the last note in the book, which said, if the dungeon is stolen by a magical beast, then it's over. The cryptic message confused Makio, who asked Jennifer if it was possible for a dungeon to be stolen. Sure immediately shouted, "No way. It's impossible to steal a dungeon with that." They decided it was time to leave the mysterious place.